Hey everybody, this is Owen from Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast, and before we get into the action today, I wanted to take a few seconds to talk about Anchor. Anchor is a great app and it is free to use. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Did I mention it's free? There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. That's the Anchor app or anchor.fm to get started today. Happy podcasting. And now, let's get into it. What's up, everybody? This is Owen from Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast. Thank you for tuning in for another episode this week. This is episode number 15. When I started the show way back in January, I would not have thought that we would have made it to 15 episodes, but it's been a blast so far, and I've got future episodes planned out, and I hope to keep this train rolling week by week. It's been a whole lot of fun, and I thank you for joining the ride. If you are new to the show and you want to check out past episodes, you can do that on any of the platforms we are available on: Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, as well as many others. Those are all available at the link in my bio on Instagram. That's ONW409 for my personal page. Or you can follow the podcast, Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast, all one word on Instagram. And you can hit the link in bio to find all the places that the podcast is available. So today, let's get into it. Highway to Hell by AC/DC, the iconic 1979 album, is what we will be talking about today. Produced by Mutt Lange and the boys from Down Under in AC/DC. So, just a little background on the band before we kind of get into the specifics associated with the album. If you don't know AC/DC I don't know what to tell you. They are an institution not only in rock and roll, but I would say in music. Songs like Highway to Hell, Back in Black, and Thunderstruck are some extremely iconic pieces of music that have been used in everything from commercials to movies and just played at sporting events. It is incredibly iconic music that is recognizable to many number of people's ears. That being said, AC/DC was not always the big-time name in music that they were. Starting out as a band in the 1970s from Down Under in Australia, they had to kind of make a name for themselves, just as any band has to do, and start from the ground up. First album, released in 1976, goes by the name of High Voltage, followed by Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, Let There Be Rock, Power Age, If You Want Blood, You've Got It, which is a live album, which leads us up to 1979's Highway to Hell. The album is 10 songs in total. It clocks in at 41 minutes and 40 seconds, so a not extremely long album compared to some other bands and artists, what they might put out. So it was the sixth album released from the band on July 27th, 1979. Another little background on AC/DC. They have had two lead singers over their history. Well, two lead singers who have recorded with them. I know there was a stint where Axl Rose fronted the band in live venues, but he never went into the studio with the group. So the two main lead singers are Bon Scott and Brian Johnson. And I'm probably thinking that someday we'll have an episode where we compare the two, whose era is better, who do people prefer, and why do they prefer said person. But for today, we're going to be talking mainly about Bon Scott, as Highway to Hell is the last album that features Bon in his style, and his lyrics, and his tone, and everything that makes Bon Scott, Bon Scott. The following album that comes after Highway to Hell, 1980's Back in Black, one of the highest-selling rock albums of all time, features Brian Johnson as the newcomer, and that launches the Brian Johnson era, which extends into 2020. So, Highway to Hell, I think it's not unfair to say that it is the best piece of music that AC/DC put out while Bon Scott was in the band. You could even argue that it might be their finest album of all time. It pretty much comes down to that or Back in Black. And there are some other, we'll call them sleeper picks that kind of, are underrated in the eye. But Highway to Hell and Back in Black are the two big albums when you're talking about AC/DC's music. So the lead up to Highway to Hell So, as I mentioned, this was the 6th album from the group. They're just trying to make a name for themselves, and they really began becoming popular in Australia, obviously their home country. Not too surprising that that's where you blow up first. And eventually they go out to Europe. So those two countries, or excuse me, those two continents, Europe and Australia, were the places where they experienced the biggest growing early on in their career. They were struggling to make it into the American scene, however. In America, throughout music history, has been a place where bands can make it big. You think of the Beatles and all the other British invasion acts that were going on in the 60s, from the Rolling Stones and the Who and the Kinks, although the Kinks might have been an American band. I want to look into that. The Kinks they're an English rock band from North London, so the Kinks, another example of that British invasion, that idea of English, European bands coming into the United States and becoming increasingly popular in the United States market for music. So AC/DC struggled to break into the American scene early on. So, AC/DC is with Atlantic Records at this point in their career, and I think they were with Atlantic for their entire career. I'm not sure, though. But Atlantic Records is a big mainstay in the music industry, especially at this point in the 1970s. Led Zeppelin was a big act for Atlantic Records, as well as many others. So Atlantic is a big name. In an attempt to kind of get AC/DC into the American scene, they pair the band with producer Eddie Kramer. Eddie Kramer has famously worked with Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, and Kiss, just to name a few of the successful bands that he has worked with. So, in hopes that Eddie Kramer could work his magic, as he did with some of these previous acts with AC/DC, in order to get them popular in the States, Atlantic pairs the two together. Things do not go very well. AC/DC is unhappy with Kramer's producing style. They are unhappy with the way that he does business and the way that he managed their sound. So they go to try and find a different direction for the album and overall the band's sound in general. And they kind of sneak off away from Atlantic Records' kind of guy who they've selected, Eddie Kramer, and they go to find Robert John Lang, otherwise known as Mutt Lang. And up to this point, Mutt Lang had not had much work with big-time groups. He had a few. He had produced before, but nothing of this magnitude. And time would definitely tell that this album would become huge. He has since gone on to produce several albums. He's done a lot of work with Def Leppard. He also produced the 1980s Back in Black, which is, as I mentioned earlier, is another insanely popular AC/DC record. So, they record the album in spring of 1979. Like I said, it's released midsummer 79. So, Mutt Lang, they send him a demo, and they really want to work with him because the guys in AC/DC, they like what they've heard. So, before they can get with Mutt officially, they also have a change in management. They work with a manager named Peter Mensch, who had worked with Aerosmith and Ted Nugent. So that's another kind of key in them breaking into the American scene, getting with management who was familiar with the scene, as Aerosmith comes from Boston and Ted Nugent comes from Michigan, the Motor City Madman, of course. So kind of familiar with the American scene in hopes to get them on there and into the charts and into get gigs over in the US of A. So when it came time to record the album, the group spent a lot more time recording this one. They were a lot more focused. They were a lot more driven to put out a great quality product. Not saying that their previous albums that come before this were not quality products, because they certainly were. I mean, they have some classic tracks, and if you're an AC/DC fan, you definitely respect and appreciate the early era of AC/DC. But Highway to Hell, they channeled maybe a little more energy into their work when recording it. So Lang, he works with the band, and he kind of works to bring his own influences and blend AC/DC sound with stuff that he thinks would be good elements to add, and he does a good job of blending the two together. He does it well enough to satisfy the band, because when they were originally working with Eddie Kramer, tales were, that he was pushing their sound kind of away from how it was originally intended, and kind of making AC/DC sound maybe a little more poppy and a little less of the beefiness and just kind of the muscle that they were looking for in their sound. So Lang, case in point, does a good job of blending the two styles together. So the album goes on, is released 1979, July, and it goes on to become the second highest selling album of AC/DC's entire career. It ended up going 7 times platinum in the United States, and is easily one of the greatest hard rock albums of all time. The impact of this album cannot be stated enough. The cover is iconic. Everything from track 1 to track 10 are great songs. It's a great sound. It's stuff you would hear on your local rock station while you're driving around in the summer heat. It's fantastic stuff. So, without further ado, let's get into it track by track, as we often do here on the program. So, we start off with track 1, the namesake of the entire album, Highway to Hell. Clocks in at 3 minutes and 26 seconds. And if you don't know this song, I feel sorry for you. Just that opening A chord, ba-na-na, 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 ba-na. And just the way the song just carries out, I mean, from karaoke to garage bands, this song has been played and played all over the world countless number of times. It was released as a single, and it's an instant classic. So the lyrics and the title and just like the Highway to Hell, I'm sure some of you have probably wondered, what is that referring to? Well, the Highway to Hell is the grueling touring schedule that AC/DC had to go through in the late 70s. When they were trying to make a name for themselves, when they were trying to hit it big. It was a lot of time on the road with different gigs at different places and a lot of travel. So the Highway to Hell is what referring to the grueling touring schedule that the band had to endure. So that's where the lyrics and the title kind of comes from. And it's such a catchy song. I'm on the highway to hell. Ba-na. I mean, it's just hard not to play air guitar when listening to this track. Malcolm Young described this riff for the track as having stuck out like a dog's balls. Just shows you how it really stuck with them. When in the recording process, they were working, they're just throwing out riffs. Malcolm and Angus just riff machines, just putting out different stuff. And that one, the riff for Highway to Hell, the main riff everybody knows, it just, according to Malcolm, stuck out like a dog's balls. It really just stuck with them. So the song is released as a single, and 6 months after its release, Bon Scott is found dead. So it's kind of a tragedy, and it's often, what might have been. Had Bon Scott been alive, what direction would AC/DC have gone in next? Would we have had an album incredibly successful like a Back in Black? Or would they have fizzled out and would have Highway to Hell been their peak? It's tough to say, but regardless, about the song specifically, Highway to Hell, it's iconic. You've probably heard it in film, in television, in commercials, and just on the radio, plain as day, rolling down the streets in the summertime with your classic rock station on the radio. So it's an incredibly popular song, and if you haven't heard the song, I really don't know what to tell you. You need to stop what you're doing and listen to that song right now. On Spotify, it is the most popular song with over 770 million plays. It's a fantastic song and a great way to open up the album. So then the album flows into track number 2, Girls Got Rhythm, clocking in at 3 minutes and 23 seconds. This is another one where it's just got a great riff. That's a thing about AC/DC. It's a lot of meat and potatoes. They're a blues-driven band who, they have killer riffs. Phil Rudd, the drummer, straightforward rock beat, doesn't get too fancy, nothing too technical, nothing too prog. It's just rock and roll. We're here. And the lyrics, sex, fighting, this is their main topics that they cover. And Girls Got Rhythm, kind of an innuendo there, What are they talking about? Talking about dancing. Nah, maybe not. But this song was also released as a single. But it's a simple, straightforward song. And that is what AC/DC's recipe is. Simplicity. Don't let, well, no. I was thinking, don't let perfection stand in the way, or don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. Not that AC/DC doesn't create perfection. I don't know why I was going with that. But AC/DC, they put simple stuff out. Not that it's bad. It is fantastic. They stick to the formula. You may have often heard, AC/DC, they make the same album every time. And that very well may be true, depending on who you talk to. But it's a damn good album. I mean, if I was in a band and I made an album that was a fraction as good as Highway to Hell, I would be perfectly content with that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with following a formula. And Girls Got Rhythm is just another example of following that formula. So we follow a narrator here in the lyrics and his fascination with girls and, as I said, sex and women and relationships. That is a big theme in AC/DC's music, and Girls Got Rhythm is no exception to that. We move on now to track 3, Walk All Over You. Clocks in at 5 minutes and 10 seconds long. Is the second longest track on the album. It has, a slower beginning, kind of more open space in the music. The lyrics do suggest more sexual undertones. Let me pull up those lyrics here. Let's see. Walk all over you. The title maybe doesn't suggest sexual, situations in the lyrics, but let's see what we got going on here. Okay, here we go. Here's a verse. Reflections on the bedroom wall. Bam, 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 bam. I'm glad you got to see it all. Bam, 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 bam. We're rising, falling like at sea. Dun, 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 dun. You're looking so good under me. Dun, 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 dun. I'm gonna walk all over you. So, the line, you're looking so good under me, I don't think that's really, it's not too tongue-in-cheek there. You kind of know exactly what he's talking about. So, like I said, AC/DC, often sexual lyrics, and that's kind of what rock and roll was all about in that era. That was very common lyrical subject matter throughout the 70s, 80s, and honestly, even today. But I will note that I am a big fan of Angus in the solo section here. I think he does a great job delivering just a bluesy style. Just, again, nothing too complicated, but it gets the job done and it sounds amazing. And honestly, I could compliment Angus's guitar work on every track on here if I wanted to. But that one specifically, I like what he's doing there. So we move on to track 4, which is Touch Too Much, and that one has nothing to do with sex at all. I assure you that is not about sex in the slightest. I know the title. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Once again, the song is sexual in nature. Clocks in at 4 minutes and 24 seconds. On Spotify, this track has over 42 million plays, so it is the third most popular track from the album. She's got the touch too much. It is 100% about sex. There is no, well, what is this one about? Well, let's closely examine the lyrics. What is he trying to talk about? No, it's about sex. It's one of those nights where you turned out the lights and everything comes into view. It's a common theme with AC/DC, and here we have yet again another song where we're talking about sex. The song was performed on Top of the Pops, which is a BBC program over in London where bands would come on and perform, and this was the song they performed. This was actually the song they performed when they did their Top of the Pops performance. It was 12 days before Bon Scott's death, so I'm assuming it was the last song that they ever played with Bon, unless there was another show in that 12 days. But I didn't really read anything about the last song they played with Bon, so I don't want to assume too much there because I could be wrong. This was the third and final single released from the album. So, she's got the touch too much. It's got a good flow. It's kind of, the chorus is really repetitive, and it's, you listen to the lyrics and it's like, oh, Bon Scott, you dirty, dirty dog. But that's kind of what we're talking about here. That's kind of what AC/DC talks about a lot. So if that's not your cup of tea, maybe AC/DC isn't your cup of tea, because you're going to get a lot of that with their music. So we move on to track number 5, Beating Around the Bush. 3 minutes and 55 seconds in length. This is the halfway point in the album. I like the bass riff that starts off the album, or starts off the track, excuse me. And unless you've heard the song, you really won't know what I'm talking about. But and then when they get to the beating around the bush, I like how the music kind of drops out and Bon kind of has his moment. But beat around the bush, an expression kind of used related to avoiding the truth. You're beating around the bush, you're not being straightforward with me, and that is how the narrator feels. Someone is not being straightforward with him. They aren't being forthright, and that's where the lyrical matter that's what the lyrical subject matter kind of steers us. And it's likely that the narrator's significant other is cheating, and they're beating around the bush, and they're not being straightforward and just being honest with them and telling them what's going on. It's a solid track. If we look at the number of plays on Spotify, a little over 8 million. So I think it's actually, hold up. It's the third least played track on the album, but it's a great track nonetheless. This album has very few flaws in it, so it's a great song, but nothing too incredible to take away from it. Nothing that's, record breaking or shattering or earth shattering, anything like that. But Beating Around the Bush, perfectly fine track. So we move on now to track 6, Shot Down in Flames, clocking in at 3 minutes and 22 seconds. I like the vibe of this track. I like how the guitar sounds, and I like the overall sound and how it all comes together, and I like just what they're singing about, and I just like how it's all just mixes together. I like the totality of this track. The opening is a lot of fun. You kind of get the energy and excitement that they're feeling in the studio. When you get the ad-libs you hear in the background, 1, 2, and in terms of what the song is actually about, they don't take long getting to that. Out in the town, looking for a woman, gonna give me good love. Anybody want to hang out with me? I'm really burning up. I'll keep going here. She was standing alone over by the jukebox, like she's something to sell. I said, baby, what's the going price? She told me to go to hell. Shot down in flames. So it's all about rejection. It's all about this hotshot guy, assuming it's Bon Scott, or it could be anybody who's listening to it. The narrator will refer to them as, is going out of the town. He's feeling good. He's about to get some. He's about to meet this lovely lady, and, she says, move along, pal, I'm not interested. Shot down in flames. It's all about rejection. So they're not all about scoring. They're not all about sex. And I did see noted somewhere, I don't know if there was an author who wrote this, so I apologize if this is someone else's thought, but Bon would write about, situations like Shot Down in Flames where he's getting rejected when that wasn't exactly the case in real life. Living that rock star persona, Bon is not the one to be rejected often. But once again, as I mentioned earlier, Angus delivers incredible solo work here, really bluesy guitarist, and that's why he's one of the best guitarists of all time. It's a rockin' track, and it's one of my favorites, I would say, on the album. 15 million plays on Spotify, so definitely has its fair share of popularity. We move on now to track number 7, Get It Hot. Clocks in at 2 minutes and 24 seconds. It is the shortest track on the album, as well as the least popular, with only 6.8 million plays on Spotify. I say that like that's nothing. If I had a song that had 6.8 million plays, I would be pretty giddy with excitement. So this is a classic rock tune. As I said, AC/DC, they're meat and potatoes. They have a very simple formula and they stick to it. And Get It Hot is another example where they stick to it. Kind of in opposition with Shot Down in Flames, Get It Hot, we have our narrator going back on the town, but this time he's getting it hot with somebody. There's not a lot to it. As I said, it's a short track. They kind of lay it all out. There's no real innuendos. It is what it is. Here's a straightforward rock band. That is exactly what AC/DC is, and it works to perfection. Get It Hot, great song. Nothing wrong with it at all. So we step on down now to track number 8. If You Want Blood, You've Got It. Clocking in at 4 minutes and 32 seconds. Over 53 million plays on Spotify. That would make it the second most popular track on the album. This is the band in 1978 released a live album by the same name, If You Want Blood, You've Got It. And it was kind of just used as an expression, like, hey, if you want blood, like, you've got it. It was before a concert, and speaking about, like, the rowdiness of the audience. So I'm not sure about the truthfulness of that, but that is what I read when doing my research. So AC/DC's, this is one of their finest songs. If I was to make a playlist of, let's say, 15 to 20 songs to introduce someone to AC/DC, I would include this one. Like I said, it's the second most popular song on the track. If you want blood, you got it. Bond does a great job singing. Not as good as I just did just now, but the solo on this one really just keeps the momentum going throughout it. The song's got great energy, and then when the rest of the band kind of sings, like the chorus, like the backing vocals, it gives that kind of group, like a bunch of guys just having fun, and that's what AC/DC really is all about. But it's an excellent song altogether, and one that I would highly recommend to fans who are not super familiar with AC/DC's content. So we move now to track number 9, Love Hungry Man. Over 12 million plays on Spotify, clocking in at 4 minutes and 14 seconds. So here we have lyrics centered on a love-hungry man. Our narrator is expressing desire for some lovin'. It's focused on sex and relationships. As I mentioned several times throughout the show, that is a common theme in AC/DC's music. So, and I'm a love-hungry man. Musically, this song is less intense and less kind of full throttle than the other ones, but still delivers solid music material nonetheless. And there's not really anything wrong with this track. It's a fine track nonetheless. So we get to the last track, track 10. This one, for being one of the least popular tracks according to Spotify, is one of the most interesting. It's called Night Prowler. And it is 6 minutes and 27 seconds in length, according to Spotify. According to the CD, 6 minutes and 13 seconds, but the message gets there either way, whether those 14 seconds are there or not. The reason this one is so interesting is it's kind of a chilling song. To open up the track, we hear this. It's like this breath. And then these kind of, it's really slower. There's less pace to this one. The tempo is much less compared to other tracks on the album. So that adds to that chilling kind of eerie feeling that the track causes the listener to feel. there's a couple different interpretations of what the song is actually talking about as well. Some believe it's related to a serial killer, serial killings, the night Prowler. Famed serial killer from the 1980s, Richard Ramirez, was inspired by the song, and that has been pretty well noted. Ramirez himself was responsible for more than 15 brutal murders. And he had, I think he was humming the song or something of the likes when police arrested him. He had ties to the song, and he had definitely noted that he was a fan of the song. So, but what was AC/DC's intention when they wrote the song? There's a few different intentions, but none of them are directly related to murder. According to the band, it's about a boy sneaking over to a girl's house. And a lot of what you read in the lyrics, it is kind of talking about the nighttime and just kind of what is out there in the night. It's not exactly mentioning, anything too gruesome or brutal, but somewhere a clock strikes midnight, and there's a full moon in the sky. You hear a dog bark in the distance. You hear someone's baby cry. A rat runs down the alley, and a chill runs down your spine. And someone walks across your grave, and you wish the sun would shine. Because no one's going to warn you, and no one's going to yell attack. And you don't feel the steel till it's hanging out your back. Okay, maybe this song kind of sounds like murder, especially when we get to the end of that verse. But the beginning of the verse, where we're talking about clock striking midnight, full moon, dog barking, baby crying, rat running down the alley, that's, imagery. That's what you would see at night. That is, it's really making the reader feel those things. But according to the band, it is about sneaking over to a girl's house. Although Angus, in a 2020 interview, related the song to in Australia, when growing up as a young boy, it would be very hot, so they would have the windows open, and they lived along an alley, I suppose, and the critters and creatures that would come up on the windowsill or try to come in the window or would crawl around outside was where the inspiration for the song came from. Now, personally, I like to think of the song as, it's about murder. It's kind of creepy. It's like, ooh, serial killer, like a spooky movie type vibes. I like that interpretation, and I mean, because no one's going to warn you, no one's going to yell attack, and you don't feel the steel till it's hanging out your back. I mean, it's talking about stabbing and stuff like that. I absolutely see how that could be interpreted from the lyrics, and I kind of see how the other interpretations, like a boy sneaking out, but I kind of struggle to see that as well. So personally, the song is about murder. And when I was doing my research and I read that, oh no, they said it wasn't about murder, I'm going to go ahead and say that was just to cover up, just to kind of say, distance themselves from Richard Ramirez, who had, claimed that he was inspired by the song. So the band did not want to make it seem like they were trying to inspire serial killers. But the song is great. It's really blues-centered in terms of the pace and just the openness and the expression that is played, both musically and lyrically. So they're really showing their blues roots here, and it's different from most AC/DC songs, as it's kind of slower and eerie and creepy and not something that's in your face like I'm on the highway to hell. Less punch in the face and more just kind of eerie, just kind of slipping through the shadows type vibes. So my overall thoughts on the album: this is a fantastic album. AC/DC is an institution of rock and roll. This is one of the finest works in their entire catalog. This is one of the finest works in all of rock history. And it perfectly captures the band's sound. If you wanted to show someone who had never listened to AC/DC, this album would be a fantastic starting place. You could also start at Highway to Hell. So the debate, I'm not going to settle that debate today, but I think that would definitely be a great idea for a future episode. But Highway to Hell on its own is a standalone classic. It is an absolute amazing album, something that every rock fan should hear at least once in their lives. It's one of rock's greatest albums, and if I had to give it a score, I would give it a perfect score, a 10 out of 10. That's right. You heard it here first. I like every song on this album. It is perfect. No complaints from me at all. This album is fantastic. So that'll about wrap it up here today for us at Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast. I want to apologize for you guys for being a little inconsistent with the premiere and the production of my episodes. I've personally just been getting lazy, and I can do better with that, and I will try my best to do better with that. Speaking of episodes that we have coming up, next week, episode 16, I plan to talk about Led Zeppelin II, released in 1969. Hopefully I can get a guest to come on for that. I've got someone in mind who loves that album. And the week after that, I'm going to be talking about Greta Van Fleet's new album, which was released back in April, Battle at the Garden's Gate. My brother Ian will be joining me for that episode, and I might have additional guests as well. The episode after that, episode 18, I plan on talking about Dirty Honey's new album, released in 2021. I listened to the album probably 2 to 3 weeks ago. It was spectacular. I have a lot of great things to say about it, and I can't wait to talk about that one. And episode 19, I will be talking about the best drummers in rock and metal history, so I'm hoping to get a lot of my drummer friends on there, hoping that's going to be a big episode for me, so I'm really looking forward to that. So want to let you guys know we got a lot of great things planned out in the future, and I hope you guys can tune in, and you continue to tune in, and I hope you guys can catch up on any old material that you missed that sounds interesting to you. So that's about going to do it for us today. Yeah, not much else for me to say, but as always, never stop rocking.